Today we're going to be running through a standard setup for most of our events. We'll go through the table, speakers, plugging everything in, and this should be a really good explainer on what you'll do for most of the time when you're setting up for an event. So what I like to do first is set up the tripod stands. And there are different sizes, so speakers and tripods have the same number. So S3, S4, T3, T4, so on and so forth. So we'll pull these out. And with these speakers, when you open them up, they're going to open to an extent and then they're going to start closing. So I like to get them right to where they start closing, right past that 0 point, and then that's where I want to lock them up. That way, when there's weight pushing down on the speaker, the legs are being pushed in rather than spreading out. And just like James has it here, you get one good and then you just match up the other one. So tighten that bottom one, and then for the top one, we pop that up. Typically about 3 or 4 holes depending on your setup, and you put that pin in first, then you tighten it up. That way all that weight's resting on the pin and it's not relying on that knob to hold it in place. Just like that. Next up is the table, or DJ booth, whatever you want to call it. And this is the new bag. The last one had a really flimsy zipper, just the one it came with, so just avoid resting it on these zippers. That's what broke the last one. But this one's more sturdy. So open it up, pull out the top piece first, set that aside, and then bag off. And we're going to open this up. And when you open it up, it's like a W or an M, so the side with 2 goes in front, middle pops out. And just like that, we can pop on that top shelf now. And the easiest way is to open it up a little extra. Pop down one side on the there, pop down one side, then just go left to right and get the other 3. Boom. And then once you have this together, you can get a better idea of how you want to space things out. You want to have your speakers even and in front of the DJ booth. That'll prevent any kind of feedback you have with the microphone on. And I like to put a flat side out rather than a pointy side out, just to prevent any kind of tripping. Good point, yeah. So then you take a step back, say, okay, how's it looking? A little off center. So then we just scoot this over. It's nice to be doing this before all the weight's on the table. So that looks pretty good. Next step is putting on these scrims. And the way it folds up, you can't leave the front ones on, but you can leave the side ones on. So when you take it apart, you got to take the front ones off. And you could go black or white depending on the event. Typically I'll go black for most events. If it's a wedding, we'll go white. It's something we can give the client an option on, but typically I just go black. So there is a certain way I like to put these on. That way they don't look all wrinkly and gross. And what I do is I start top middle and I just line it up, that top edge, and then I just press it on like that. And then I go the same way on the inside, line it up with one hand and then press it down. That way your middles look nice and even rather than starting on the outside and then the edges could go a little off center. And then when you go to the other side, just make sure that's pulled tight. And then you're gonna do a similar press over here, but you're actually like pulling more to the side as you do it. So that way it's getting it nice and tight, and these never have to be ironed. You just have to put them on right and they'll always look really good. So top, left side, or inside, outside, and then when you get to the bottom, I actually pull it down a little bit and then press it. And just like that, looks nice and clean. Same thing for the other side. So now that we got the stands, tripods, now we got the tripods and the table set up, next will be the speakers. And key note with the speakers, use proper lifting technique. You don't want to hurt your back. Now with the speakers, I like to keep the power cords inside the side pocket for each speaker. That way you never have to go looking for those. XLR cables are a little more interchangeable, but it's nice to know that you're going to have all your power cords inside the speaker bag. You never have to look for those. Bag off. Now with these speakers, they have two holes on the bottom. The middle hole, or the hole closer to the front, is gonna position the speaker vertically, while the hole towards the back is gonna tilt the speaker forward. So just to demonstrate that, this is the hole closer to the front. As you can see, the speaker's a little more tilted. And the reason why you would use this kind of setup is if you were up on a stage or somewhere higher, we were trying to push the sound more down. Most of the time, we're going to be playing at the same level as the crowd. So we'll just use the hole towards the back, and that'll put it nice and level, just like that. Now, depending on your, where you're playing, you might spread the speakers out a little further apart, maybe a little closer together if it's tight, but for most purposes, this is the kind of setup we're looking for as far as speaker placement, table placement. So for the rest of this video, I'm actually going to turn this around. That way you can see what's going on behind the scenes with the rest of the setup. Now we can start putting everything else together as far as what goes on the table. This can go on, just get out of the way. I prefer it on my right side. You might prefer on the left side, just preference. That goes on there, gotta glue that. And now we'll get into our cable bag. So here's our cable bag. I'm actually gonna get even more detailed with how I label everything. That's what tape and zip ties are for. But for the time being, what we've got in here are power cables. We got a nice big 50 foot on the far end. We got some 25 footers, I believe, right here. Two of those, so you got 100 feet of power right here. And then inside this third pocket, sometimes there's XLR cables in there. The fourth one is where we keep our headphone rack and then a wired microphone. Inside here, the big pocket, we have our power conditioner, which is a power strip for, simply put. But what this does is when you go through this, rather than just plugging the speakers right into the wall, it helps reduce any kind of like hum you get just from like plugging the speakers right in. In a sense, it kind of cleans the power. It's not the technical term, but that's how I like to put it. Then we've got XLR cables, a bunch of XLR cables, and then gaff tape. And then inside the bag and under this big pouch, I always like to keep just an extra XLR cable underneath this little flap, just in case. Couple spare things we have in here, multi-plug if you need it. In the top zipper, you'll typically find some sort of USB hub. This I'll talk about more in a second. This is going to be like your outlet tester. And then we have a remote for our uplights. This cable right here, I call it the oh shit cable. and this serves a couple different purposes. One, you can plug it into the DJ controller and you're able to plug in your phone if you need to maybe just run off a playlist for a little bit. Not necessarily something that we always try to do. We try to mix live, but let's say for some reason you needed to step away, take a bathroom break, and didn't have anything ready to go. This is your buddy right here. Also, if for some reason like your laptop were to stop working, controller's still good. You're able to quickly just plug in your phone and keep the music going while you figure things out. So it doesn't work with every DJ controller, but there are some other options we have. There is an extra headphone cable here. And what you could do with these speakers is if you needed to, if you didn't have the plug-in for the oh shit cable, you could plug in your headphone jack right here, and that'll get you by. So same thing, you would just pull off the little dongle from here. So we'll get more into cables and what they're all for, but basically those are all the things that are inside the main compartment here. Up in the front, we like to keep some business cards, a pen, some more plugs, just some extra stuff here. And then typically, it's not in here right now, we'll have a notepad too. So the notepad and the pen is just used for taking requests on the fly. If someone comes up to you and say, hey, can you play the song? You don't always have to play it right away. Just write it down and get to it when you can. But yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a couple extra cords in here, such as like a spare USB, spare USB dock. So chances are if there's something that isn't working or if there's something you forgot at home, check all the pockets in the cable bag. You might be able to find it here. Next, I like to set up power. And this cable's nice, it's actually really long, so we'll set down the power strip there and then run this cable to wherever we're plugging into, and you just plug it right in. And if it gives you a green light, that's good. Sometimes it might give you a red light and it'll say no ground, which basically means these two top ones are wired, but the ground isn't. So long story short, if it says no ground, you're probably okay, but it gives you any kind of fault other than that, try the other outlet, and if that one's still not good, use a different outlet. You know, every place is wired a little differently. Some places are wired better than others, so just want to protect the equipment, and if everything looks good on here, go ahead and plug it in. Another note on that while we're here is if you get somewhere and the outlet isn't snug like that and it's really loosey-goosey, go ahead and like put some tape over it just so it doesn't fall out while you're mixing. And another thing too is if it's like an outlet where you think someone might come along and unplug it to plug something else in, also put some tape over it. That way someone doesn't come in and, you know, try and take that away from you and then shut down all the music. So typically we're put in a spot where we're pretty close to an outlet, no one's gonna mess with it. But just something to keep in mind if you're running power somewhere where someone might not really know what that cord is for. So we got power plugged in. Now we're gonna plug in the power to our speakers. Speaker cable, plug it in first here, run it through 2 clips, and then we'll go straight down and then through the little triangle, wrap it around one more time down below, and then tuck it right under the table, and we'll plug it right in. So just like we did the power cables, next we're going to be running the XLR cables. We have a few different lengths of XLRs. Typically something like a 25 foot will do you. If you ever need to run your speakers further apart, super simple. At one point I was looking for like some kind of connector to be able to put one XLR into another one, but all you need to do is literally just plug it right in, just like you would anything else. So XLR into XLR. So for running the speakers to your DJ controller, I always start at the speaker and we're gonna be going into side B. Could go side A, but for whatever reason, I always just pick side B. Now you see this one says in and this one says out. So we're gonna be going in, which is the male, or we're gonna be putting female into the male side. So just like that. And then we run right through the same clips here. And then however you wrapped the cords the first time, you'll do the same thing you did with the power cord with the XLR cable. So it looks nice and tidy. And then from there, you just run the speaker right up. Get this bag out of them. So from there, you just run the speaker right up through the hole here. This will go into our DJ controller for the time being. I'll just rest it right there. So we've got power and sound going through with speakers to our booth. Now is a good time to set up our DJ controller. So today I've got my DDJ 1000. She's a little dusty. Last event was dusty. But we'll go ahead and set that down. And I always have with my controller my power cable, headphones. I like to use a nice long headphone cable, phone charger, laptop charger, and USB. So getting everything plugged in. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Headphones, set them to the side for later. Got our power cable. Now this one's long enough where I can just run it through, plug it in over here. And then the other end, I can just keep it wrapped up and then just plug it right into the power strip. Then I've got my laptop charger. I put this one on the end of the power strip, that way it's not blocking any of the other plugs. And run this through on the same side you got your laptop. And then a phone charger. I always have one of these because if you're running a hotspot, you don't want your phone dying. If there's ever a time where you have to use that little outlet splitter, that little multi-plug, I'll run the laptop and the phone charger on the same little plug, and then run something a little more heavy duty on its own plug, rather than plugging like a light bar into the same thing as a speaker. You don't want to overload any one of the plugs, but it probably won't be an issue. So USB for the controller, plug it in. Depending on which controller you have, this might look a little different. And then since this one's a little longer, personally what I like to do is just tuck the excess down into the bottom of the table. No one's going to see this but you, but if you're staring at it for 4 or 5 hours, just it's nice when things look tidy. And then we're going to get our laptop out, and we're almost there. All right, so we got our laptop, represent.
Let's see.
Ooh, see that? That's nice. So we got our USB hub and our solid state drive. There's a little piece of Velcro on here, so you can just stick that right on there. Looks nice and pretty. And then down here, we'll plug in our controller and power for the laptop. Sometimes I use a mouse, that's what that is. Not necessary, but it's there. And then you tuck these cords out of the way, and pretty much all set up.
Just like that.
Just like that. Oh, almost set up. So, last but not least, our XLR cables. Looking at the DJ booth, this is my left side, and this is my right side. So looking at the DJ booth, this is my left side and this is my right side. No one's gonna know the difference but you. But if you want to plug in your left into the one that says L, and then your right into the one that says R, it's actually gonna look like they're in opposite sides, but you're plugging in the left speaker to the left input and the right speaker to the right input. Doesn't make a difference, honestly, but you'll know that you got your left on the left and the right on the right. So last but not least is just tidying up the cables. I got the power running off to the side for the sake of today's setup, but most times we'll probably have the power cord running behind us, if not speaker cables, light bar, power cords, whatnot. So this floor mat just helps kind of cover anything up so you're not tripping. It also helps when you're standing for a few hours just not to hurt your back so much. And if you want to take some extra time to tidy up cables down there, that's on you. But what's most important is tidying up any cables that are out in the open. We don't want anyone tripping. We don't want any equipment falling over. So real quick, we'll go through how to tape down a cable. So this is our trusty gaff tape right here. And anytime we're just taping down like a short little run of cable, what I like to do is just rip off a few strips, like so. And just like you took the time to make your cables look nice and tidy when you set them up, you can make them look nice and tidy when you tape them down. So those little details that just make the whole setup look a little better. So you don't have to be a perfectionist, but the main thing is to make sure you're being safe. So something like that. We'll put some horizontal strips down, so perpendicular to the cable, like so. And if you need to use the whole roll of tape, use the whole roll of tape. Like, we can always buy more tape, but we don't want anyone tripping and falling. So in a setup like this, where you're just running cable between the DJ booth and the speaker stand, that'll do. No one's gonna trip on that. But let's say you're running like a really long stretch of cable, like something over a couple feet. That's where I would double down on the tape, and I'd follow up with some longer strips. So for the sake of the example, let's say this cable stretch was a lot longer, I would go ahead and come back with it and go vertically, or, you know, align with the cable too. That way it's just really covered up. Nothing's gonna lift up. And if you had like a big, 5-foot run of cable, you're gonna get more spaces in between these little strips where the cable could lift up, something could happen. So better to be safe than sorry. The more tape you use, the safer you'll be. But yeah, something like that looks good, it's safe, and once you're all done, this gaff tape just comes off really easy. Some surfaces don't tape as well as others. In those instances, maybe you'll use your mat to cover the cables, or we'll have something else at that point, but 9 times out of 10, you'll be on a hard surface and the tape will do you. So always use tape, safety first, then teamwork. So that's pretty much the whole setup of the equipment. Now we'll go ahead and turn everything on and we'll go from there. So now that we got everything plugged in, I always just like to make sure controller's off. Then I'll plug in, to make sure controller's off, Make sure your speakers are off. And then you can go ahead and turn your power strip on. Fire up the laptop. I'm using Record Box, so we'll get that powered on. That's going to start turning on. We can turn on our DJ controller. Make sure your volume's down. Turn that on. So right here, there's a power button. So you just push that in, and it'll be on. So volume's down, faders are down, just making sure you're not going to surprise anyone on accident with like a signal or anything. So we got computers firing up, controllers on. We can go ahead and turn these speakers on over here. Simple little power switch. Now, these speakers, these are the K12.2s, and you can see there's a little screen here. So line A and line B are going to correspond to where we plug in over here. And there's actually different presets you can do. So typically, you'll just keep it on this one. It's dance, and what that does, it gives it a little more bass, a little more highs. For most of what we do, that's going to give us the best sound. If for some reason you needed to change that, just hit enter. Right there, that's the enter button. And then you can scroll through all these different presets. Now, most of these we won't use. So I just like to keep it on that dance one. You could also switch it to default if you just wanted to keep it more like balanced. And if you were doing an event where it was more like background music, not really dancing music, and you don't want so much of that bass kind of drowning out the sound of people talking, for lack of better words, default might be better for that instance. So we got power on. Our gain right here, we just want to keep that at 12 o'clock. There are times where you would want to mess with this. If you wanted to like have one speaker louder than the other, you might turn one down a little bit, or you might turn the other one up a little bit, just depending on how you're setting up. Most of the times you'll just keep everything at 12 o'clock. So same thing over here, just check your speaker. Same preset on both sides. Gain's at 12 o'clock, and we're good to go. So now that we got everything set up, we can come over here to our laptop. That's a good point. So in Record Box, you can actually go to your view settings and switch to dark skin or light skin. And light skin will help you see during the day. So just for a little sound check, I'll pull something up here. Basically, when you're doing a sound check, you want to set your master volume at whatever level makes sense for the space. So you'll find out where that is, you'll go out to where the people are going to be listening to the music, you'll find out what sounds good, and you're probably going to keep that right about there the whole time you're doing the event. If you need to make any EQ adjustments, you'll do them on the trim here. That way you always know that when everything's at 12 o'clock and this is where you originally set it, it's going to sound good. If you start messing with your master volume, you're not going to really know where home is and what's going to sound best in the space. So another point on that is that you'll do sound check when you get there and set up and like the room's empty or the party hasn't really started yet. But once the room actually fills up, people are talking, you're going to want to go out and make sure the sound still sounds good. Chances are you'll probably have to adjust down or up depending on where you started at. But any song really will do for sound check. Just something that's going to fit the vibe for what you're going to be playing that day. So, sounds good. Of course, one more thing is just make sure your speakers are pointed where you want them. And that's pretty much where we run through for setup. So we set up tripods, speakers, booth, plugged everything in. From this point, we're pretty much ready to go for an event. This whole setup takes no more than 30 minutes. We always like to give ourselves extra time for setup in case we need to call for an extra wire or we forgot something or whatever it may be. More time is better. So budget like an hour for setup, only takes about 30 minutes, but with everything we just ran through, the more you do it, the faster you'll get. And any questions you have, don't be afraid to ask. We're always here to help. So that's pretty much it.